Hello, thanks for tuning in today. And welcome to any replay viewers as well. So because it's the Dem debate today and Senator Sanders is still inexplicably in the race despite having no mathematically probabilistic pathway to the Dem nomination. So his polling in the remaining states shows him between 40 and 21% behind, 21 points behind Joe Biden, who is the moderate candidate that the majority of the Democratic Party has coalesced behind. Hello to Jack and Craig who've just joined us. So what I was wanting to share with everybody today was a little bit of a radio interview with Sanders in 2018, because I want people to understand that this habit of staying in a primary race, even when it's statistically impossible for him to win, is not a novel thing for Senator Sanders, and is in fact a pattern of behavior of sabotaging the prospects of the Democratic candidate because his enemy is the system. And that's his shtick. That's why he's a senator in the first place. He has a talent for denouncing others and denouncing systems. Hi, Alan. Thanks for joining in as well. So yes, it's very important that we engage at least a little bit with the evidence that Senator Sanders knew that Hillary Clinton was being disparaged directly to his voters and his supporters, even after the primary had finished and Hillary was the nominee, and that this was the work of Russian accounts. He admits in this interview that a staff member called John Matters, alerted him and noticed that the Russian accounts were on his Facebook page, disparaging Hillary Clinton in a very severe way, calling her a murderer, in much the same way that you can currently see all of the Sanders supporters rampaging around Twitter, saying all sorts of highly scurrilous and slanderous things about Joe Biden. So I'm crossing now to that interview. We can click on listen. This is an interview with Vermont Radio.
I'm Edition co-host Bob Kinsel. Just wanted to let you know that this podcast has been edited for brevity. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so the relevant page that I'm skipping
Who do you
to
think would be raising that issue, saying that? And you have a president of the United States who is not saying that. What is going on? And there is speculation. Do the Russians really own them? Or do they have something?
Do you believe they do?
I don't know. I think it's something very weird. How does it happen?
We're going to listen to this for 2 minutes.
If in my staff, all my staff is saying something, and I don't have anything to say on what is an enormously important issue. So bottom line here, it seems to me, is if Trump cannot, for whatever reason, do the right thing, Congress has got to act. This is what you do. 3 things. First of all, you make it loud and clear through legislation that meddling in American democracy is a very, very, very serious crime, and there will be severe, severe consequences.
Thanks,
Number
Bernie.
2, you provide resources to states all over this country to protect their voting mechanism. And that is to make sure that when people in Vermont or in California cast a vote, that vote is adequately counted. I think there's got to be a paper trail. To tell you the truth, I'm conservative enough to think we should do what Canada does in national elections, go to paper ballots, because we can make sure then there is not cyber attacks against our voting systems. Thirdly, we have got to get to Facebook and to Twitter and to all of these platforms and say, sorry, you have not done a good job. And you're going to have to change what you're doing. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. For whatever reason, the president will not be involved in that. Congress, hopefully, and we're seeing some bipartisan effort on that, has got to be involved.
So you believe your Republican colleagues will get on board with that number one?
Some of them will.
Enough of them to pass legislation to move that forward?
I hope so.
On the Russia investigation, we've got a note from Mika who says, Senator Sanders said this Sunday on TV that his campaign and he were aware that Russian bots were promoting his campaign versus Mrs. Clinton. He's also said that he was aware WikiLeaks was publishing emails stolen from the DNC by Russians. Why did he not once warn his supporters about this? Before the election in November 2016, his supporters obsessed about WikiLeaks, and many decided not to vote for Clinton because of it or to stay home. If he was aware that Russians were trying to promote him and divide Democrats against Mrs. Clinton. Why did he not communicate this to his supporters?
Well, as I've just indicated, now, as I've just indicated, this was not supporting me any more than they were supporting groups like Black Lives Matter that are fighting for social justice. Trust me, that's not what they were doing. They were trying to cause division. As I've just indicated, in September, actually, a guy from our campaign did go to the Clinton campaign.
But Mika wants to know why you didn't take that to your supporters, take that public.
Well, we knew what we didn't know. I didn't in September. Somebody. In the midst of all of this, I was out campaigning very hard for Hillary Clinton. So I don't, let me leave it at that.
Why leave it at that? Why not? Because, I mean, it was a specific question about why didn't you go to your supporters? So I'm curious.
No, because we did not know early on.
In September,
okay. No,
why
what
not?
she said, what was her point? That
so if you knew that Russian bots were promoting your campaign versus
I
Mrs.
did not
Clinton.
know that Russian bots were promoting my campaign. Russian bots were not promoting my campaign.
Let's leave that.
What we found out is that in April and May, it appeared that there were lots of strange things happening attacking Hillary Clinton.
So let's take support out of it, because I think support is a charged word. But if you and your campaign knew that there was Russian meddling and that it was trying to sow divisions, why not take that directly to your supporters, many of whom really, hung on your every word, as you know.
Well, I would say that the real question to be asked is, what was the Clinton campaign? They had more information about this than we did. And at this point, we were working with them. So I think the proper question is...
So did the Clinton campaign say, don't talk about this?
No, of course not. But who do you think would be raising that issue?
Well, I could see a world in which Mrs. Clinton said, it's the Russians, and people and Sanders supporters say, oh, that's baloney. But if Sanders says it, they say, okay.
We knew what we knew when we knew it, and that's about all that I can say.
And before we totally leave the topic of guns, which we will double back to.
We knew what we knew when we knew it, and that's all I have to say on that topic. So that's Sanders, very evidently obfuscating and changing the topic away from his choices, leading a campaign and using the excuse of, I was very busy running around campaigning, to explain why, even though he specifically says in September, somebody went to the Clinton campaign and said, we've noticed some suspicious activity, why he didn't go public to that with that information to his supporters to let people know that American democracy was under attack, that Hillary Clinton was under attack specifically from Russian accounts, and that consequently they shouldn't dismiss her claims to be being attacked by Russians. They should take that attack seriously, that the Sanders campaign had support. Now, I'd like you to know that I have chosen to self-isolate, and my children are home from school today, that I'm homeschooling. Hey, don't be in the picture, pumpkin. You guys, if you want any Munch and Crunch, you have to get the capsicum out of the fridge. Wasn't the lunch your sandwich? You want another piece of that? Jamie can get one. Yeah, but it wasn't Munch and Crunch because it didn't have a vegetable. Muffins are going to be after your next piece of work. Next subject is going to be science.
10:50.
Correct. So the next subject is science. That was your lunch play break. You can have a capsicum. Can you chop that, please? Thank you, kind sir. So yes, I'm homeschooling my children at the moment because schools haven't closed yet. But if you can, you should. That's what I've been advocating for, and that's what I'm electing to do. I think my husband thinks I'm a bit of a doomsday prepper, but that's what we need to do, to tell people, even those who think it's an overblown risk or that there's no point in staying home from school unless everyone does. Every chance that we have to break a transmission chain for the COVID-19 virus, we should. If we can stop our children going to school and potentially asymptomatically sharing the virus amongst themselves and their classmates, infecting teachers who may have contact with other adults, who could infect the elderly, who can overwhelm our healthcare systems until people with cancer diagnoses, pregnancies, reactions to drugs, accidental swallowing of poison, so that those people can get the intensive care beds that they need, that we don't have systemic overwhelm of hospital systems. So somebody says, keep safe to me, which I appreciate. Thank you. So yes, I could also share something, which is a small clip of Joe Biden telling Bernie of some of his environmental accomplishments, that he has done work to promote renewable energy, and that he's done that while Sanders has been on the sidelines as a senator with some degree of power, just not happening to get any legislation passed in relation to helping the environment. So Sanders is great at denouncing things. Sanders is less good at getting things done, which makes him an excellent asset to cultivate. Just his ego is great to cultivate, because if you can get Sanders' ego intent on pursuing a campaign, regardless of whether or not that campaign is actually supported by a majority of Democratic voters, he can just stick with that campaign and continue to rationalize that it's worth it because it's Bernie against the system. All right, so COVID, yes, agreed, is a real and significant danger. Bernie has passed 3 bills during his tenure as a senator. That's not going to have any sound. I have to do that again. Oh, maybe. No sound unless I do that again. I will have to go soon because those children will need some supervision, I think. How are you going? Did you chop something? No, sweet pea.
Please,
right.
I'm just about to get it.
That's why not another new coal plant.
Okay, let's listen.
I was able to make sure we invested $90 billion in making sure we brought down the price of solar and wind that is lower than the price of coal. That's why not another new coal plant will be built. I did that while you were watching. On the recovery act, I was able to make sure we invested $90 billion in making sure we brought down the price of solar.
Oh, wow, I can listen to it even without the footage on the screen. So who enjoyed watching me react to Bernie's Vermont radio interview? Because I can do reaction videos, but my goal at this point in time is still to help circulate important public health and safety messages. Because one Kremlin tactic, one effective propaganda tactic, is not to suppress the truth, because that draws attention to it, in what Americans may commonly know as the Streisand effect, after Barbara Streisand trying to hide a bit of negative gossip that then had a lot of attention paid to it. So yes, trying to specifically shut down journalists or specifically shut down bits of information makes it more interesting, makes it an attentional outlier. And yes, so a more effective way to drown out the truth is to literally just drown it out, not to directly try and suffocate it in its sleep, but to crowd it out with distractions and just a volume of propaganda around the points, around the messaging you want to get across. So Trump is very effective at doing that. He's a showman. His ignorance of the world and governmental systems is one of his best assets, because it leads people to underestimate the harm that he can accomplish. So I always want anybody who follows me to please refrain from deriding Donald Trump as an idiot, because there's idiocy, but there's also cunning. And to call him an idiot is to blind people to the fact that he's likely to be reasonably cunning and to have extremely cunning people helping him and filling the vacuum of power that exists in the White House, because they got rid of a lot of the other powerful investors or powerful actors in government circles. They took away the power from scientists. They hollowed out the EPA, the Environmental Protection Authority, and the Department of Agriculture, etc. So Trump created a lot of authority. He he can be said to have taken executive authority, he is the executive branch, and that he collected power and usurped it from the legislative branches, as well as poisoning the judicial branch, such as the Supreme Court, which he stacked with people who, such as Brett Kavanaugh, who were accused of rape, and he still got Kavanaugh appointed, thus making Kavanaugh extremely beholden to Trump and to whomever paid off Kavanaugh's significant financial debts accrued by having a greater expenditure than income and paying for memberships of exclusive private clubs, as well as private schooling his children and having a large mortgage. I'm sure it's difficult to not call Trump an idiot, but to call him an idiot even when his actions are incompetent is to ignore the fact that he's likely a Russian asset who is being given directives to assist with incompetent rule that negatively impacts on Americans and sabotages the ability of Americans to respond effectively to internal and external threats. So yes, Trump will still have to face the electorate, but at the same time, totalitarians are not unknown for trying to sabotage elections. But at the same time, there's lots of proactive people who are trying to safeguard the elections, and let's hope and send them best wishes for their success. Bots always insert false interjections. That's a bit pompous. Bots come in with fake messaging that's often very repetitive because they have a tactic and they are working towards that technique of overwhelm the truth or crowd out the truth with noisy assertions that are false. So I should take this moment actually to thank the moderators who are often on this channel, helping clean the bots up out of Periscope and YouTube alike. So we don't have any, actually maybe if Clive, if you're there, actually I don't know if you have moderator privileges to help you get rid of somebody on commenting on YouTube, but that's okay. I'll see what I can do about that for next time. I've known for a long time that people called Hitler an idiot and a clown, so I've had that to warn me against succumbing to the temptation. Even though I should say I'm sure I've succumbed to the temptation often enough to call Trump an idiot, but just to say that I did have that internal proviso reminding me not to do it because I saw a newspaper clipping in 2016, a historical newspaper clipping showing how newspapers said we should be reassured that Hitler's not as bad as hysterical people said. People denounced him as an idiot, but it seems that he is in fact harmless, and all of those fears were overwrought. Oh, Clive can report the bots. Thank you, Clive. That helps. Alan, if you would like to be a moderator as well, let me know and I will add you to my list of familiar faces or familiar names on my moderator list that have the power to help clean up, mute, or block the bots and the trolls. So, yes, it does seem as if there's a very powerful amount of energy in Democratic circles to support Joe Biden and his likely running mate, Kamala Harris. Joe promised today that he will have a female running mate, which is only fair. Americans, there's enough residual sexism in America, I've said a few times, to make it really a controlling factor. It's hard to run with a female candidate when there's already the factor of Russian attacks helping to foment divisions and prejudices. And the electoral college system means it's not the popular vote that decides the president. It's the electoral college system. It gives undue weight to, or disproportionate weight to, the votes and therefore the prejudices and biases of people in more rural conservative states. So yes, Biden promised to have a female vice president running mate, and that means Americans can have a vice president who's a woman, helping get them acquainted with a woman close to the leadership role, which should help. Sometimes it takes a sort of fait accompli to see something happen and to come to terms gradually with the fact that it's not as scary as you think. Women have the aptitude and the ability to succeed and to serve others very well in leadership positions, and know that that doesn't detract in any way from men's status and privilege. People still can respect men, even when a woman is in charge of something. And it's just up to us to make sure that we are clear that we still respect men. Even when a woman ultimately becomes the president, men, you can still be respected. You don't have to cling to any fake superiority. You don't have to have an unchallenged position at the top of some kind of hierarchy. You can still get what you need, and you can still be happy, even when women are acknowledged for being competent and capable. Yes, so a woman will not be chosen for the Democratic nominee. The nominee will be Joe Biden, which is great, which means we don't have to worry about sexism as a deciding factor, as it was one of the deciding factors in the 2016. Did you hurt yourself? Are you just scared?
He's trying to bite you.
Don't. I'm live videoing. Okay. At least you're getting your exercise. That's very good. Yes, Clive is saying he loves strong women, which is great. We love that allyship. There's no harm in loving strong women. Angela Merkel is the most competent world leader right now. Jacinta Merkel, also a very strong national leader for New Zealand. Yes, that's what I was underlying. Joe Biden has promised to have a female running mate. I hoped to be clear in that point. I'm celebrating it. I think it's a great thing, and it's great because it gradually introduces Americans to having a female close to the leadership role. Of course, my fingers are still crossed that the election proceeds smoothly. Donald Trump has a lot to lose in losing the election. He's not just losing the presidency and becoming a one-term president. He's opening himself up to criminal liability for all the crimes that he wasn't charged with purely by virtue of the office he illegitimately holds. So that's all from me today. If you have any topics you'd like to suggest I touch on, let me know in the comments section. I'll put up a banner because I do have a Patreon account to help defray the costs of broadcasting live via a special streaming site. It's not a high cost, but it's there, and if you want to contribute, feel free. I have a few Patreons that I'm very grateful to because it helps me approach this as a job to try and turn up on a regular basis to keep sharing information and trying to help with public safety information as well as reliable information about the various candidates, as well as interesting and informative speculation about the emotional drivers behind some of the things that happen. So if you're familiar with me, you'll know I often argue that we're living in a post-9/11 world, which some people refer to as a post-political world, where disruptive candidates are often voted for, which in part is people having fear, residual fear from terrorist attacks, and wanting an alpha candidate who announces that they prioritize American safety and the American people above all else, which sounds like a proposition that's difficult to argue with, except when you don't look too closely at somebody's resume because you're too busy saying, that's my favorite message, prioritizing Americans, and you overlook the multiple bankruptcies and criminal history, the under-prosecuted criminal history of Donald Trump, then you open your country up to the type of incompetent rule that America is currently suffering from, where Trump has likely interfered with the CDC to prevent wide-scale testing being done at an appropriate time, leaving the disease to spread unchecked, leaving people to not be quarantined when they should have been, and to fail to take the measures that need to be taken about shutting things down in order to prevent community transmission. Because the epidemic wasn't contained, it spread all over the world. It was always going to be a difficult task to contain it, given the nature of international travel, the widespread nature of international travel nowadays. And yes, but mitigation strategies are not being adopted in a timely fashion by the American federal government. And also hardship relief strategies, like helping homeless people who rely on the donations of people who walk past. So in a shutdown, people don't walk past and give homeless people the money that they need to buy meals on a day-to-day basis. And they're not getting the leftover donations from fast food shops, which are having to shutter. So there's a lot of people that'll be cold and hungry, spending their nights on the streets. There's over 70,000 children and migrants in detention who are unlikely to receive appropriate medical care, who are unlikely to be in hygienic conditions that would help prevent the mass spread of the virus in the camps. And I do not doubt but that Trump thinks that mass outbreaks of disease in the camps will be a political draw card for him. We should start talking about that now, how having mass outbreak of infections in the camps should not be used to promote Republican support for Trump, because the fact that Trump cultivated that situation means the Americans employed to look after the people in those camps are also going to be exposed to the disease, which means they are also going to be transmitting the disease to their families and to their broader communities. So purposely jeopardizing the people in camps adds to the amount of jeopardy that Trump has placed on the American people. So I'll make another video about that on another occasion. Oh, there are some messages I haven't seen. From Craig. Craig is saying Trump's dangerous. Agreed. Clive is saying it's getting bad in Ireland as well. Alan is saying it's up to each person. Indeed, it's up to each person to responsibly self-isolate as far as they can. But at the same time, federal directives would help the situation. They would help alert people to what is needed, so that it wasn't just Twitter people who understood the need to soften the curve, flatten the curve, preserve hospital systems by staying home and reducing the transmission chains that are carrying the disease from asymptomatic person to other vulnerable population groups. Yes, there'll be less tourism, obviously, and economies are likely to go into a global recession, if not a global depression, due to the protracted nature of this pandemic and the fact that it's not possible to just tell people to jolly up and continue to spend money in public, because people can't do that. That's two competing messages. You'll see individual Republican supporters on Twitter saying, defy the fearmongers and go out and go to restaurants, whereas the scientists, the medical officers are saying, ideally people are staying at home and not engaging in that close interpersonal activity with strangers, not going to restaurants or bars, because that is increasing the passing on of the disease, that is increasing the number of transmission chains from asymptomatic to asymptomatic person, eventually to a vulnerable person with a respiratory problem, with somebody who's aged over 60, someone who has diabetes, etc. We can't easily succumb. We can't allow ourselves to succumb to eugenics thinking that dismisses this as purely a problem for the elderly, that we should just say, okay, goodbye, elderly. It's not just the elderly, it's hospital systems that support every age group, that support pregnant women and children and people from car accidents, etc., that support our communities as a whole. So someone's telling me that Ireland has already closed schools, pubs, sporting events, etc., amongst other initiatives, which is excellent. And as the days come, more and more countries will be doing that. We should be elevating talk about the need for not only social isolation, but also the need for hardship relief. And if our governments don't organize it, we need to start pooling our collective funds and start making donations that can be distributed locally by people with a reputation for integrity at a local level. Yep. And I guess using the existing framework of charities that look after homeless people. They need resources. They need people strategizing about mechanisms for distribution that don't inflame more transmission chains, etc. Okay, thanks for your attention. I shuddered a bit because of this comment, which I have some problems with. Yes, it would free up housing if the elderly became ill and died. Oh, that was a joke. Okay. Lordy. I'll encourage you not to make those type of jokes on my broadcast or elsewhere, just because one thing we're fighting against at the moment is eugenics thinking, where you decry the worth of other demographic groups and you diminish their collective worth. So we can all participate in that, which will add to their suffering because we will then take less action to save people. Yes. Hi, Norma Jean. Thanks for joining in. Each afternoon, Trump and a herd of drones present a TV show to praise all the great things that Trump is doing. Yes, because fascists rule through appeal to optics. They come to power by short-circuiting people intellectually, by appealing straight to their worst emotions, straight to their most selfish and irrational emotions. Saying we should have a Muslim ban does not increase the security of Americans. It merely increases the suffering and separation of families. But it is a balm to the wounded feelings of people who experience distrust towards demographic groups, rather than a much needed feeling of need for intelligence communities to cooperate at the best of their abilities to help thwart any future terrorist attacks. People just want all the terrorists to be gone, and that's an understandable wish, but you can't conflate that by saying, hello, Pumpkin, I'm coming to help you guys now. It's back to schoolwork time. Lunchtime is over. Yes, it is. Yes, back to homeschool. Thank you for your kind attention. Please share this broadcast if you found it valuable, and please feel free to contribute with any ideas of questions to ask, structural elements to incorporate, or to offer your services as a moderator, etc. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Alan, Clive, etc. All of the regular people, Alan, Craig, Julie. I wouldn't be able to do this as much without your support. Thank you, everybody. Namaste. Oh, and this is the new just you can go to if people try to shake your hands, if you are still out moving around in the world, if you're one of those people who still have to actually go to work. People move to shake your hands, just press your hands together. That'll stop them. Namaste is an appropriate greeting at this point in time. And our politicians should be modeling that as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.